All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are actually not far from where my wife grew up, just over the hill. We landed on this project because we were looking for something local to come to somebody that maybe had used Zip for the first time. And it turns out the local Huber rep introduced us to very good friends of ours. So we're here with Suprema Homes. We have Aaron and Paul. And then, of course, you know Steve Baczek, architect.
This video is sponsored by Huber Engineered Woods and is part of the On the Road with Hugh series, where Steve and I get to visit job sites, his, mine, or other people's.
So what we thought we would do in this video is basically, this is their first time using Zip. So we're going to ask them, why are they using it, and then discuss some of the pain points. Why'd you guys decide to use Zip?
Primarily where Washington State Energy Code is going, we're going to have a continuous layer of 1-inch polyisocyanurate. The Zip R has that laminated on the board. We're not using that yet to achieve the code, but we thought it makes sense to go with the with the Zip sheeting now, get our framers used to it, make sure we don't make any mistakes in the future with it, and so it's going well.
So on the Zip R side, what made you select Zip R as a way to meet the energy code as it comes in?
Easier installation.
Yeah, it is. It's just one trip around the building.
It's one trip around the building.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So Zip system was just a way to train the framers to get ready for the Zip R.
Yep. Correct. And deal with all the other challenges that you might face with resistance to change.
Yeah. There's no resistance to change in construction, is there?
No.
We'll discuss some of that. First time using, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Lots of unknowns on the part of some. Engineer had some unknowns. Inspector had some unknowns. The framer, you know, when you're changing the way you do something, those old habits die hard.
Mm-hmm. And how did you have to educate the engineer?
His first concern was, well, you're not going to get your shear.
But from the R6 or from just the Zip panel?
Well, he just thought of Zip as all one thing. It's all the same. So when we informed him, obviously that was an easy one to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's stamped right on the panel. It's a structural one panel.
Yeah.
So it's nice when they stamp that stuff on the panel. One of our first inspectors was like, I need to see more paperwork on this. And I was like, well, it's got the TICO tested stamp on the back and the structural one on the front. What other paperwork do you need? Oh, never mind. So that was good. It requires us to be a little bit more educated on some of that kind of stuff. And for the Zip R6, does he think that's going to be an issue as far as the engineering here?
He does have concerns there, but I don't think they're insurmountable.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, we're in Seismic Zone D2 here, just west of Seattle, in the Seattle area. So being that the 1 inch of foam between the structural panel and the stud, that nail's cantilevered. So we use a longer nail. Our engineer had us just tighten up the nailing. This is the first time the framers used it?
Yes.
So what doesn't he like?
He doesn't want to have to tape the seams.
Did he give a reason why?
Because he doesn't want to have to tape the seams.
Yeah. Classic framer.
Yeah.
In his previous work, was he the one that put up housewrap?
No.
Somebody else did.
Yeah, so that whole effort with the WRB went to him. So, there's concerns when you change somebody's scope of work. But he's already involved in air sealing that house by the way he frames and some seal products we have him put on when he applies the sheathing. So he's already kind of getting into a realm that maybe he wasn't used to in the past. So this is just another element of that. But we do want him to tape it for a big reason. We want to inspect it.
Yeah.
We want to see that product is properly installed and that everything's sealed, and we want that house dry before the next guy has to come here.
Do you find, Steve, traveling the country, how often or what's the blend between framers doing the taping and the siders doing the taping?
I think it's mostly the framers.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, because if you use the Zip and you tape it, then your enclosure gets watertight quicker.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the panels receive less durability risk, right? So if building inspector's concern is, there's edge swelling on these panels, well, put the panel up and tape it. And the edge swelling is a non-issue anymore. And, in terms of framer, it's interesting because, for every conversation you have that has a kind of a contradiction or a fear, there's a solution and there's opportunity, right? So if I was asking your framer, okay, you want to tape it, I'm assuming he gets paid more if his scope increases. So part of him is saying, no, I don't want to make any more money. I'm already out here. I already have my trailer here. I already have the ladder and scaffolding up, but I don't want to make any more money. doing it. So it's always, there's this fear opportunity link that I'm always questioning, I guess.
Yeah, well, as the framer, but we always did our own siding, so we would hang the house wrap, and our goal was to hang house wrap so it was so tight there wasn't no wrinkle, right? And it was a point to like bragging rights. I'm going to go and tie back that whole wall or put the
There's some guys that wrap it like a Christmas present.
Yes, and so it was who does that the best on the crew.
Yeah.
Well, when we come to taping, we realized pretty quick that our least experienced person could be taught to tape and roll the tape, and now we could turn them loose. And we had a young guy working for us that he just felt like a fish out of water the whole time because everything's new and you don't know where you fit in. And when we taught him how to do the tape, he was just like, now he could just have a job that he could focus on.
You're the tape guy.
You're the tape guy. Yeah. And then you own it.
And on this project, the inspector wouldn't let us tape while the walls were down.
Yeah.
And he complained that there's going to be edge swelling on this product. Like there's not on OSB, of course. Never does
Right.
OSB swell.
Or plywood.
Or
Yeah.
plywood. But he wouldn't let us tape it while it was on the ground to prevent or minimize that.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, they're going to have to tape this after they've raised the walls. But our hope is that in the future, we can educate some
Yeah.
and eliminate that problem.
Yeah, it's like the first project is a little bit of a lost leader in the sense that this is going to be the one that takes us the longest. We have to get our questions answered, figure out what our workflow is, and then educate everybody else. It's no different, though, with house wrap, where the trades come through. The plumber never comes out and slices the house wrap and folds it before he shoves his pipe through, right?
Right.
So then you're doing all the repair on that kind of thing. I think the framers, once they get used to, like, as framers, we just want to build things. That's what we're good at. Where we do it, we take pride and do it fast, get on to the next project. But because of the energy codes, we're using this a whole lot more than just our back and our physical ability. And as framers, we're a little resistant to that. But if you have picked your framer because you feel like they do a good job, then they're probably the right one to do the taping. It takes a lot of athletic ability to get up there and roll trusses. So even on the safety side, if they have to tape it after the fact, they're still not up on a 40-foot ladder with 9-foot rolls of house wrap.
Right.
It's just rolls, and if you set the ladder, you can actually run 2 pieces of tape at a time. It becomes really efficient.
Yes.
It's just new to them.
New to them.
And I think the inspector's not real familiar with the benefits of this system. And so then, of course, he knows the framer. And he talks to the framer about all the, perceived negatives of the system, which are not true.
Yeah.
So then the framer's like, what am I getting into here? So it's just a matter of learning, and eventually he'll realize it's a better system.
Yeah, we find it's just so simple because there's really nothing different for the framer. It's a wood structural panel, and we have shear inspections here. A lot of the country doesn't, so that's an incentive for us as the framer to not overdrive nails, is because we have to follow the engineering. There's no way around that, and somebody inspects it. Sometimes it's the engineer that inspects it.
And it's just not seismic. I mean, by us, when we do houses on the water, we have to have our structural engineer come and do a walk around on the shear panels.
Yeah.
For wind.
And he's looking at it,
and then he has to write a letter to the building inspector that says, I came, I saw, I've conquered, and moved on. Right.
Yeah, because then it's on his stamp.
Right.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point. Actually, it's the one word, perceived, right? The idea of when something is new, I get it. There's a perception of, hey, let's hate this. Let's think of all of the problems. But on the flip side, every one of those let's look at what the opportunities are here. Let's understand why this could be a good product. How can we help you build a better house? It's really interesting. I find that there's a number of people in the building industry that don't want the building industry to move forward. They put up hurdles at every step, whether they're building officials or general contractors or framers or architects or engineers. They're all guilty of having a certain percentage that does nothing but put up roadblocks. And then equally, there's a certain percentage that says, listen, we got to stop thinking that way and start thinking about other things. How can we work with a company like Huber? I mean, I've been working with them for, I don't know, probably 15 years now since I did the first Huber our first Huber house. And they're a company that I could go to and say, hey guys, I need help doing this. Or we get building inspectors that always ask this question. They have an army of people. They have one full-time guy that does nothing but relate their work to the code. So you can go and ask him, how does this relate to the code? He'll give you a whole bunch of sightings in the code book. Bring this to your building inspector and have a discussion, you know, and stuff like that. But it is interesting that, you know, perception is definitely the key, I think, in the whole industry and how we approach things. Because there's people, you know, I don't want to build a house too tight. I don't want to do this. Tape's not going to last. But we've been using tape for 50 plus years on houses, right? We're just not using it in this way. Our technology in adhesives is the best it's ever been in the history of building. But yet we're worried about tape falling off the building, right?
What was your guys' like, as you did the research, what was your biggest question mark about Zip System that you kind of really had to think, do I want to adopt this?
It really was the tape. It was changing what our citer had to do to what our framer had to do. You know, you resist when you come up with a standard, something that's a habit. You get better at it because you do it the same way all the time.
Wrap. The building inspector is not worried about tape falling off the house wrap.
That's exactly right.
I have literally a library of photos of driving by buildings and seeing house wrap torn off a building in the wind, right? And the building getting now exposed. And this is after the windows are installed. So it's like,
I would challenge someone around here to find a picture of a house that doesn't have the house wrap that's falling off.
Right.
Or patched diagonally under the roof line, or just not done to the standard there. But the building inspector probably doesn't go out there and say, you know, that's not installed properly.
Yeah.
Right. It's house wrap. Well, that's a given. We do it that way.
Yeah. It's just wrapped. I can't see wood, so it must be good.
So to elaborate on your idea of perception, we get very selective in what we choose to perceive and understand.
Confirmation bias, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the change was the process. It wasn't the product as much as the process for us. We're moving what they used to do to this guy, so now we have to train the crew because they're all used to doing it the same way all the time. Every time you introduce something new, you're going to trip over yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure that, is this worth the effort for us? And we think that it is.
Yeah, and I feel like with the idea of training, it's something we don't do enough in this industry, even though we need so much training from manufacturers. You know, we do a little bit, but you as the builder have to set the expectation to the framer. And then, like, I was talking to another manufacturer, and they were like, okay, we publish in multiple languages, but nobody reads. So if we could show this in like a 30-second video, for example, you're supposed to gap the panels. It even says it on the panel. Very rarely do framers not just slam things tight. So you have to almost kind of enforce that as the general, like, no, we require you to gap it. Well, then I'm going to get off the stud. Nope, because the panels are undersized just enough to allow for gapping. Same thing on subfloor. Like we're so used to that. But back in the day, that was something we had to learn. I remember the owner of Evergreen Lumber, Jeff, coming out when I was a teenager, 16 penny nail between the sheets. He was adamant. So he did the training. You're using OSB now. You have to gap this stuff. And we're just like, oh, you know, whatever. Here's the size of nail, gap the panel. And I still remember that. So training's not new. It's just maybe because of what we're doing now with energy codes, the risks are a little higher. We got away with a lot back in the day, but we can't get away with it. So we got to do that upfront training.
Yeah.
And so now that you've used the tape a little bit, do you have more confidence in it?
Oh, yeah. I've always had confidence in the tape. Yep.
How come?
Because I've seen enough of it online.
Yeah.
And I've played with it. It's good. It's a good product.
So hands-on.
Hands-on. I've watched people put tape on, leave it on for a while, and then try to rip it off, and it just rips the wood off. Mm-hmm. It doesn't rip the tape. It's actually will delaminate OSB when you're pulling it off.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to go and see how it's made, and I was surprised how early in the process the facing goes on the panel. I just didn't know. Yeah. And so that gives me a lot more confidence that it's not just like pasted on at the end, but it's integrated into the panel.
Yeah, and these adhesive-backed products have, come so far over the years. And I was in the roofing industry for over 30 years, and as I was mentioning earlier, now there's self-adhered membranes in a low-slope application where you're going to have water sitting on top of the membrane, and it doesn't allow water into the lap, even in that sort of a situation. So, in a vertical where you're putting siding over the top of it, no problem. You can barely pull that off of that panel. And as it ages, it gets more tenacious in its bond.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you could probably speak to that since you got to spend time with a chemical engineer on how the whole tape thing works.
Yeah, I mean, the whole pressure-sensitive adhesive, the fact that the board is actually made to receive the tape. If you take a piece of zip and you look at it very close, it has a kind of a micro contour facing. It's not like glass, right? And it's made that way so that when I put the tape in, the tape kind of over time, it's called the wetting process, but that tape goes into all the nooks and crannies and kind of bites almost like a Velcro, if you will, but it's an adhesive parallel to Velcro. And so when you go to pull it off, you can see like the adhesive kind of pulling out of the nooks and crannies if you try and pull it off. So if it's installed properly, I mean, I was in the business of investigating buildings for years and investigated hundreds of buildings. And I always tell people, I've never seen a material really fail. I've seen executions fail, right? Not material. If it's going to fail, it's because it was probably installed wrong, not that the material itself, like you're not going to come up here one day and all the tape's just going to be laying on the ground, right? If it is, then it probably wasn't installed properly. Because these companies they didn't design this tape overnight, right? That tape probably went through probably at least 5 years from initial, hey, let's do a tape, to we can roll something off the line. And I would guess that since Zip has been out since 2009, the tape's probably been revised a handful of times because they learn and new technology comes on board. So it's like, hey, we can do this now, right? Whatever company that's developing the adhesive says, we actually have one that's even more aggressive. So let's get a new addition to the tape. And, people, again, perception, people sit there and think, oh, someone, Jimmy thought up the tape idea yesterday and made a roll today and sold it, and we put it up. It's like, no, these guys are freezing that stuff. They're baking that stuff to understand what happens when this is exposed to 120 degrees, what happens when you tape the panel and it's 0 degrees, because those things matter.
For us here in the Pacific Northwest, we just want the panel to be dry, and we want it to be clean. And it doesn't have to be like scrubbed clean, like you're cleaning a bathroom. But when you wipe it down, we have little battery blowers or gas blowers, blow off the dust, wipe it. It's a pretty simple process. Yeah.
And that's no different than house wrap, like you mentioned earlier, right? If you're going to put tape on your house wrap, it needs to be dry, and it needs to be clean. How many times have you seen house wrap with footprints on the wall, right? and they taped it right over the footprint, right? So all those products are the same. You have to clean it, you have to dry it, and then you can put your tape on.
The real pain point is just education, and that's true of everything.
Well, I think it's perception. If the building inspector or the building community is really concerned about building a good building, then allow me to build a good building, right? Let me put the tape on when the panel is dry. Let me have the panel dry. You want to climb up a ladder? I'll put scaffolding up there. You can go and inspect. You can see the nails through the tape if it's rolled properly.
Right.
So we have to work together. I'm not trying to demonize the building inspector community, because there's a lot of building inspectors that I absolutely love working.
Oh, they catch us where we thought we had something, and it's like, woo.
Yeah.
I feel like it's changed. It used to be very adversarial, like when I first started, but a lot of our inspectors now are younger than me, and they very much view it as a collaborative thing. Like they're just the final check, and they've caught things where I'm like, how in the world did I miss that point load? That's a structural thing. So
we want inspections. We want inspections on our WRB.
Yeah.
And this gets us that. We can see that it's done right.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that the inspector doesn't look at. He doesn't look at the house wrap to know that it's done right. And if you talk to any remodeler, you know how many houses are done wrong because they're pulling off the siding and they find the rot because the siter put it up and he wasn't trained right or whatever.
Yeah.
In this case, at least our project managers can inspect the house before it's sited and know that everything's right.
Yeah. And what is interesting is, having the conversations I've had in the past. If a building inspector says, okay, I don't trust the tape, it's like, okay, well, when we install the windows, do you want to come out and do a window inspection? And when he says no, I'm going to say, well, you don't trust the tape, but you're going to trust the window installation. Like, that's where most buildings fail, is when we cut a hole in the building. So if you're really concerned about water getting in the building, then why don't you come out when the real problems are the challenging ones that you should inspect? Like, there's a real disconnect between their concerns and real problems, in my eyes.
Yeah.
And it's education.
I could imagine too, if the stuff that you're seeing on a daily basis, you're catching things that are just fly by night. Like, we had an inspector years ago tell us, he was in the crawl space checking anchor bolts, and the guy had literally glued the nut to the washer. There were no anchor bolts. So when they have enough of those experiences, I can understand.
They do.
Even for us, like,
But they know. Because when I go into a place, if I'm in Boise, Idaho, and I've never been there, I can call the building inspector. Who's the good builders out there? And who are the builders? Can you give me the top 3 builders that I would want to work with, and give me the bottom 3 builders that I shouldn't work with? Yeah. They know. They know who they are.
Yeah, we, my brother, Brian, Aaron knows Brian well. We always kind of viewed it as, do we really want to open this can of worms with the building department? And Brian's like, if we open the can of worms early, then we can have that open discussion. Things go better for everybody when that happens. So communication is just good all the way around. So
if we're allowed to put the tape on before we push the walls up, it's a lot safer.
Yeah.
For our people too, and that's important to us.
Yeah.
So if we're all going to work together on this stuff, it's kind of like the building science stuff, the safety, the inspections. It all really.
It's kind of like the conservation committee saying you can't cut down those trees, but the septic inspector says, well, you need to put the septic over there where the trees are. And it's like, well, you two have to figure out how to work together.
Yeah. So where can the viewers find Suprema Homes on the internet?
SupremaHomes.com.
SupremaHomes.com. So in the Pacific Northwest. So I think as the viewer, you already get an understanding that as builders, they're paying attention to the details, making educated decisions. So you're already putting yourself above the competition, asking the questions and making the decisions, and then verifying that what's being done is working.
I commend you guys because, it's one of those things, this stuff isn't going away. Right? It isn't going to go away, and it's only going to get worse. So when builders say, well, I'm not using Zip R panels. Okay. Stay tuned, because in a couple of years, your tune is either going to change or you're going to be working as a chef or a baker, because you're not going to be building houses anymore. Because the train's left the station on a lot of things, and we're going in a direction that isn't going to change. It might veer a little left and right, but we're going down there.
Yeah. You just got to get on that train. Yeah. And be one of the first, be educated. So like you're saying, these changes are coming. We've seen them coming, and they keep fighting about when they're going to be implemented, but we're there now. So that's an interesting process. Let's start with 7/16 zip, then we'll head to Zip R.
That's right.
Yeah, get our feet wet.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Yep. So SupremaHomes.com.
Yep.
.com. Of course, go find Steve Baczek, architect, everywhere. The Build Show, Steve Baczek. Just Google him. You find Steve. He's everywhere. Thanks for watching the video. We'll see you guys in the next one.